Hi everyone, thanks for joining myself, Sophie Parrott, a journalist at HR Grapevine, today for a HR Grapevine and Achievers webinar entitled Liftoff, Launching a Recognition Programme Without a Hitch. A truly important topic because recognition programmes are key for business success. I'm joined today by Bianca West, a Senior Implementation Manager at Achievers, and Nicolas Van Den Steen, Director of Total Awards and Analytics and HR Business Partner in IT at Bridgestone, who will both elucidate further on this subject. As ever, please use the question function to put forward questions to the speakers, and I'm sure that both Bianca and Nicolas will be happy and able to answer. But before we get started with the presentation, we've got a quick poll that we'd like to run just to see how many of you have used formal recognition programs. So you should see the poll on the screen. If you guys just want to take a minute or so just to cast your votes, just click on the most appropriate option. So the question is, do you have a formal recognition program in place? So there are 5 different options to choose from. So firstly, yes, fully automated and integrated. Secondly, yes, but could do with improvement. Thirdly, sort of, disparate programs that need to be consolidated, nothing in place or not sure. Just give you another couple of seconds. Great, so as you can see, the most popular choice was option number 3, which is sort of, so disparate programs that need to be consolidated. With in second place at 24%, we've got yes, but could do with improvement. And with 0%, everyone seems as if they're sure about their formal recognition programs, which is great. So without any further ado, I'd like to hand directly over to Bianca and Nicolas to discuss the topic further.
Thank you, Sophie. That's very interesting to see that the majority of the folks joining us today have many different programs operating within their business, especially because it is incredibly consistent with some of the partners that we have obviously working through the implementation with. So there's some consistency there, which is great. As Sophie mentioned today, we will be talking to you about the proven success that we've seen across some of our most successful innovative programs, and really how you can begin on your journey. As Sophie mentioned, you are going to also hear from Nick at Bridgestone. They are headquartered in Belgium, but they are across EMEA, and he will be discussing how they've implemented Achievers' best practices and, of course, share anecdotes unique to his launch and the launch of the Go Beyond program. Our goal is for you all to leave this session with some tips for building a recognition and rewards solution that will begin to transform your workplace and your employees' experiences. And what you also can expect is that we'll leave some time for Q&A. So if anything comes up throughout the discussion that you'd like to address, please do not hesitate to interject when we get to that part of the presentation. All right. So at Achievers, we understand, especially as your implementation partners, which is the team that I'm a part of, that it's not one size fits all. But there are some key things that unifies our most successful launches, and they really together create momentum at launch that directly impacts the program getting the critical mass early on to be self-sustaining. So what you see on the screen here are our proven framework and key principles that we recommend to promote exceptional employee experience. And I'll be reviewing these with you to kick off the session with the objective of painting a very colorful picture. And we'll be tying them to some challenges that we've seen some of the people and teams that we've partnered with run into, and how we've helped them overcome that within the year. All right. So a compelling business case, which is number 1. The reason that this is important is because it aims to prevent your project and your team from failing before it even gets off the ground. And in order to do this, you need to understand the problem that you're looking to solve. If you're unable at the early stages to articulate the value of the project in a compelling way, or if it's not aligned to some of the strategic business goals that the overall organization is working towards, or as simply as not being as efficient as socializing the implementation early on, you'll run into some common setbacks. So applying this principle and getting significant leadership advocacy early on will really have positive impacts on the program overall. So in our partnerships, it's very common that the question comes up when is actually a good time to begin engaging cross-functional leadership. And through the partnership that Achievers provides, we can share metrics that tie to recognition and engagement to address those business objectives across the entire organization, whether it be CSAT you're looking to drive, safety, engagement, retention. We show you how to achieve this with leveraging recognition to drive those behaviors. And if you're wondering when the best time to do this is, it's immediately. And if the business isn't ready when you're in the contracting stage or before that, don't worry, because also within the implementation stage and of course post-launch, we will be partnering with you to understand exactly what your business benefits would be and helping to alleviate any assumed risks and really just uncover opportunities that we have to leverage the program and drive the behavior that you're looking to see. We've done this before and we can help educate your stakeholders on any outcomes to expect based on the actions they're looking to take or that they're prepared to take when they're launching the program. Number 2, executive buy-in. So whether you're launching the Achievers program from an HR perspective to help with the shift in culture, maybe from a communication perspective to facilitate cross-departmental communication across the business, or maybe your short-term goals really are to automate some programs or create a global enterprise recognition solution, which is probably the case for most of the folks who ended up in the majority in the earlier poll. Leadership support can make or break you not only launching this program, but the success of it. Its power throughout the process should not be underestimated. The most influential factor in driving accountability and adoption, both out of the gate and post-launch, if you want to sustain that, is to the level to which, your senior executives and leadership team at the front line are bought into the value of employee-centric mindset. So if the leaders at your organization are bought in and they're advocating for the program, you're going to see that repeated across the business at all levels. Again, typically when this conversation is had, the question that comes to mind, or the concern I should say, is that there are competing priorities across the business, depending on what area of the business you look into. And we'll help you align a solution that is not only connected to the overall organization-wide objectives, as we've mentioned, but also create some really strategic goals. So we'll be very specific and we'll ask for the visibility and vocal support from the executives across the business or leadership team across the business in order to meet those goals and hold ourselves accountable. And of course, you're probably wondering how you're going to make them, them being your stakeholders, your leadership team from across the business, care about what you and your team are trying to achieve. And we'll, as I've suggested, work with you to map out who we need to get on board and earmark some opportunities to engage with them throughout the rollout of the implementation, post-launch, and even before we begin implementation, if we can find those opportunities. And what we can combine is industry research, tool sets, of course, within our change management approach to build some speaking points and help you advise on opportunities for some initiatives that will engage them. And this has been proven to be really successful in our past launch partners. So we'll address any barriers to your success as they present themselves along the way. Number 3. So measuring the success of the program is based on some key metrics across Achievers. For launch, our goal internally is to see 80% activation across our predominantly online clients. So this means if your employee base has direct access to a desktop computer, we see on average about 70% to 60%, I should say, for offline organizations. So this would mean that your employees are dependent on a mobile device to access the system because their day-to-day lives don't necessarily mean they're interacting with the desktop computer. And we're looking to see 2 recognitions sent on average for everyone activated in the first 30 days. One of the benefits of using these particular measures is that we can show how your program is performing compared to the entire Achievers client base, as well as against industries that are a similar size or in the same sector as you. But none of this really matters if we don't understand what's important to your team, what's important to your business. So we'll be looking to define those success metrics and plan towards it. The decision making that we'll look to direct you in will be so that you can achieve those exact objectives over a time period that makes sense for your business. So again, some examples of this would be if you're looking to move the mark on an engagement survey, if retention is potentially an issue at your business, we can share examples of how some other organizations have used recognition to move the dial in these areas. Now, it's not surprising if you might be thinking that you don't really know what your measures of success should be, or your organization is in a point of change. So you might not have something that's very clear and set in stone. And through our partnership, we want to obviously maximize adoption in the early weeks of launch using the tool sets that we have seen work really well, but we'll continue to partner with you after launch to make sure that we're carving out objectives that make sense for your business and tying that back to the analytics that we have access to. So in short, if you don't know what your success metrics are at this stage, that's okay. We will work with you to build those out in the short term and the long term and advise on opportunities for some strategic approaches. And if you do know, that's okay too. We can, of course, tie analytics to those objectives and make sure that in our consulting and implementation and post-launch, that everything that we're enabling in the system, driving from a change management approach are directly tied to that. So you can correlate it and have some strong metrics to tie back to your stakeholders. Number 4. So in order to complete a really successful implementation, a variety of roles are required on your side and on the Achiever side. So when you're thinking of resourcing, we're really aiming to get on the team some subject matter experts in those respective areas. And a strong implementation team will get us to our target launch dates. They'll aid in creative solutioning when it comes to thinking outside of the box, and also be really dedicated and aligned to the objectives of the program. If you're worried with knowing that you have some competing priorities in your business, or there might be some poor internal communication as far as it being challenging to secure resources, we can offer you, of course, an understanding of what that time commitment expectation will be. We can be as strategic and efficient with your subject matter experts as necessary, and above all else, be flexible and adaptable. We've had large launch teams and small launch teams, and it really is just about building out a program that makes sense for you. So during the business case stage, ideally, that's also the time that you're securing some resources, and it's an important part of the conversation. So if you're able to have it up front, we recommend that. If not, that's okay. Utilizing your executive sponsors to help align and socialize the expectations of those resources and what kind of team you might need across other areas of the business is also something that we can leverage. So as far as aligning your objectives and timeframes and communicating effectively to identify and mitigate risks for the rollout, we really want to overall just create a plan that works for you and works for the team that you have up front. And as I mentioned, we're happy to tailor the approach to our offering so that we can support you and make the implementation process as fun and as meaningful and efficient as possible. Number 5, we've successfully implemented complex, multilingual, international programs by guiding them through discussions on localization, impacts of point system decisions, really the list goes on. We care about the employee experience and tying your decisions back to your objectives, as you've heard a couple of times already. So the solution is robust and it's configurable, but we aim to plan for the majority and not for the exceptions. And we want this program to scale with your business and be easy to use for your employees and administrators. A simple solution can be so elegant. So a lot of the consulting and friendly challenging, as we like to say, is to ensure that we keep that in mind. And of course, you might be concerned about building a simple solution when your organization is complicated, and you are not the only one. We are looking to find creative solutions first and foremost, and ensure while doing that that the sentiment isn't lost but aligned to your long-term goals as far as user ability and ease of flow of the system, and making sure that we're not preventing people from getting on the system because it's too complicated. And you might be in a place where you agree with all of our best practices, but your business just isn't ready to adopt them. And that's completely okay. Maintaining the status quo, especially if it's convoluted, will or could potentially end up with unengaging behavior. But as I mentioned, our job is to challenge you about any previous practices that you have seen to be proven to be unsuccessful. So if we're sitting in a place of complexity and we need to take a crawl, walk, run approach, we will 100% walk you through that path and the considerations that are aligned to that. Our philosophy is really simple when it comes to configuration. We want to remove the barriers and create consistency in your communication, and also ensure that there's trust in the system early on. So we'll be focused on the behaviors you're trying to create, but of course we'll be adaptable to what is possible today and what might be possible 6 months or a year or more down the line. And last but not least, communicate and engage, number 6. So we'll be partnering with you to review a communication assessment early on. And from that and our communication strategy session, we'll be advising on the channels and audiences that we recommend you target during launch, with the aim of developing a holistic communication and change management strategy that ties in communication and training. It will not be the first time that we have heard that communication has been challenging, and that it's not always provided the adoption or behavior that you're looking for it to do. And with our focus on creating communication strategies around specific audiences and channels within your business, we will focus on authenticity, transparency, and how accessible the program is. The best communication strategies are ones that keep the employees front of mind. What's in it for me? What's important within this solution for my area of the business? How will this make my relationship with my colleagues, my direct reports, that much more seamless? And that's how we'll focus the communication strategy up front and in an ongoing way post-launch. So really, as I will summarize from a communication perspective, we are working with you to build an effective communication plan that will begin a domino effect of slowly sharing information that's more detailed about the system over time. Initially, we really want to focus on the reason why recognition is important to your business, what engagement is going to mean for your everyday experience as an employee, and also that you're coming from a place, the organization is coming from a place of caring and knowing that recognition is needed. So we've seen a variety of tactics to boost adoption that have worked really well. And we know for a fact that it involves a multi-tenant communication and training approach. And we have tool sets and many templates that you can utilize and edit so that it makes sense for your business, so that we can be focused on investing in, of course, how recognition is going to contribute to your culture change. So with that, I will now ask Nick from Bridgestone to share his implementation experience, how they've used the Achievers platform to create a recognition program that is embraced across their organization, and really how they're looking to tie it to their business goals.
Thank you, Bianca. Hi, everybody. Okay, before diving into the actual content, I thought it was worthwhile to actually talk a bit about the actual context, not just the context within Bridgestone, but also the context in the automotive industry. Bridgestone, as you may know, is mainly known for tires, although it's not the only thing that we do, but we're actually part of the automotive industry. Now, automotive is going through lots and lots of change. We call that CASE. CASE essentially means it's connected. That means refers to a concept which is called the Internet of Things, where everything is connected to one another. Second one is automated. Third one is shared, and fourth one is electric. Now, why is that relevant? Is because if you look at, for instance, Facebook, Facebook is run on about 60 million lines of software code. But if you look at the average car leaving the factory nowadays, it's more than 100 million lines of software in just a single vehicle. And that software is obviously not just for the car itself, but you also have chips and tires that feed data. And this is why the change in the industry is actually quite big. Just to give you a practical example, we are recruiting data engineers, data architects, data lakes, all these elements, they are really relevant to us as well. And so as you can imagine, there's again, we're moving away from a pure traditional tire manufacturer. So that's more from the external perspective. Now, if you look from the internal perspective, what we've seen is, as you know, we run engagement surveys or culture surveys, and what really came out as one of the results, or the red theme is that people were actually asking for more recognition. So they didn't feel recognized enough for the contributions that they do on every single day. So that was the second element. Changing workplace. I'm sure this is relevant to many of you, also within the organization. The additional context for Bridgestone is that we have, up until for a very long time, essentially have had country-based organizations. We are now more consolidating. And this requires working together in different ways. We've got project teams that are spread all over the EMEA region that work in different time zones. So from that perspective, it is changing as well. And as you can imagine, working in EMEA, the diversity that we have from an ethnicity perspective and also from a gender and age perspective is actually quite big. Fourth element is the employee value proposition. One thing that we see is, and this is simply by going on Glassdoor, is that if you look at the top 100 and the top 500 companies, almost all of them have a formal recognition program. And the last one is Bridgestone Americas. And why am I saying this? Bridgestone Americas is actually one of our another large strategic business unit that we have. They have been using Achievers as well. We obviously went through an RFP process, and we've really decided to team up with the Americas and use Achievers, not just specifically because Bridgestone Americas was using them, but they really stood out from multiple ways. One was, first of all, the customer focus was really high. And then secondly, the actual expertise both from a content perspective, because we really felt that they knew what they were actually talking about, the actual content of what recognition does, what it doesn't do, but also from a project management perspective, which was really rigorous that we could, what we actually saw. And to be honest, we haven't regretted that partnership ever since. Next slide, please. Okay, so in summary, the reasons why we wanted to embark on a recognition program is that on the one hand, and that goes back to the case model. So the industry is changing. It also means that the organization is changing. We have a new vision, we have new behaviors, and we really see the recognition program as an element, as a way to align people with the new set of behaviors and the new vision of the organization. So that was the main reason. The second one, the encourage, on the right-hand side there of the screen, is that really links back to the engagement survey that we ran, which, as I mentioned earlier, there was a real cry from people to have more recognition in the workplace. And then the other element, so the improve, this was actually coming from the research that we did, which suggested that if you have a happier and a more engaged workforce, it also translates into actual business results. And I'll give you a practical example about this in the next couple of slides. Next, please. Okay. So what we have done, together with some of the expertise that we got through Achievers, but also some of the reading that we did and the research that we had done ourselves, we essentially created a program based on 5 parameters. The first one is the value and the goal driven. And again, that refers back to the new and the updated vision that we had for Bridgestone on the one hand, and the set of values on the other hand. So that was a very important reason. Number 2 is the monetary and the non-monetary, or the other. On the one hand, yes, we do want to have more recognition in the workplace and for people to be more engaged when they get recognized. The other, what we felt was also important, that we also wanted to have a monetary component. And why is that monetary component important? For the simple reason is that up to now, well, there is the traditional pay and performance cycle, which runs on an annual basis. Certainly pay is delivered on an annual basis. But because people are actually working more on a project basis, we felt it was important to also recognize them for the actual project work that they were doing. So there is a monetary component, which is not the focus, but there is a possibility that we actually built into the program. Number 3, the peer-to-peer, and this links a bit with the culture that we have within the organization and what it is that we want to change. And we want to have more peer-to-peer recognition. And why do we think that is important? Is that if you want to even reinvent yourself, which is essentially what Bridgestone is trying to do at this very moment, it is very important to have a culture of openness, open-mindedness, and also of innovation. And innovation doesn't necessarily start from the very top of the organization. It typically starts at the very bottom of the organization. So having that peer-to-peer recognition is really important. I would say it's not just about peer-to-peer, but it's also about the bottom up. Frequent and timely. This is really about being smart about how we go about things. And we wanted to leverage technology. Why did we want to leverage technology? Again, it goes back to the changing workplace. So we've got teams working in different time zones spread across multiple geographies, and having technology allows people to connect with one another instantly without necessarily going through, I would say, the more regular change like email as an example. And then public and social, we really want to make it, wanted it to make it transparent and essentially what it says here on the slide, so showcasing what good looks like. Next, please. Okay. So we talked a bit about the buy-in, or Bianca talked a bit about the buy-in. I'd just like to echo this because what really worked for us was how we went about to create that buy-in. We obviously started from the very top of the organization and made sure that we had their sponsorship through to be just like a business case. And in our business case, we looked at people, the process, and the cost and the ROI. So people that really links to the survey that we run, and again, recognition was the red theme in that whole feedback that we got. So that ties in with that one. Process, why? Is because we had multiple approaches across different countries, which we really wanted to harmonize and combine into a single one. And the cost and return on investment. Return on investment, we simply said, okay, this is the turnover that we have in the organization. And for those of you with operations in Eastern Europe or in the Middle East, for instance, I'm sure that you will experience that the turnover is relatively higher than it is in Western Europe. And the way how we pitched it was to say simply, if we can actually impact turnover only by 1%, this is what your return on investment is going to be. And when we showed it up on the slide and we talked about some of these numbers and how we actually computed it, to be honest, it went really fast. So we had their buy-in and approval in the span of about 20 minutes, and that was it. So that went really well. The next thing that we did is we had a formal steering committee. Now, why did we have a steering committee? Because it would have been ideal, obviously, for our executive committee team to spread the gospel, go up on stage. But to be honest, they're also very busy people. So we didn't necessarily want to burden them with this. So the way how we went about this was set up a steering committee, which had a representation of key functions in key locations. And we really leveraged them as key ambassadors for this program. What we did then obviously next was rigorous project management. Now, why is that important? To be honest, I mean, the reputation of HR, certainly within Bridgestone, is okay, but we're not necessarily known for our rigorous project management. And I think here we really wanted to showcase again that yes, HR is as good as any other function in project management because you create credibility. And how do we create credibility? Again, there was a regular meeting cadence. We had a dedicated social wall. So we're spoon feeding them with articles, research in progress. So the way how we approached them, we kept them basically engaged throughout the entire process from design to the actual implementation. And even today, we still have regular follow-ups with them to see how the program works, what some of the key learnings are, where do we need to adjust and adapt, et cetera, et cetera. So the steering committee is not just for the whole implementation, it still exists today, and we continue to leverage them as well. Next slide, please. Okay, so change management and communications. Bianca hinted it as well. So, and I'll start on the right-hand side of the screen. What we really did was we deliberately took a lot of time and effort to train people. Now, the training was done for two reasons. On the one hand, people could actually have a refresher on how to give feedback, because some over time probably have a bit forgotten how that actually works. So it is in the training session, we not only explain them what the purpose and the intent was of the program and how they should use it, but we also explain to people, this is how you can actually give feedback to people. This is what a good recognition looks like. And this is how you should give feedback to people. That was not just done face-to-face. We also have recorded these sessions, and we put them on our learning management system, which is online, which is available 24/7 for people, even through devices. The format that we actually use to launch a campaign and to communicate this to the wider audience, we used multiple approaches. So we had posters. We used obviously the social wall. We had flyers. We even had goodies. The goodies depended a bit depending on the location. Just as an interesting comment, so one of our colleagues suggested that we could actually use M&Ms and have the logo of our program printed on the M&Ms, which is something which is possible. But then we ran into the practical issues of, okay, we have some factories where the temperature can actually rise a bit. We also have factories in the southern part of Europe and in Africa. So temperature is a bit of an issue if you're working with M&Ms. The other component is that people on the shop floor, so the actual factory workers, we had some questions on health and safety, specifically if you think about people grabbing into a large bowl of M&Ms with dirty hands. So that's why we said, you know what, let's keep some room for every site and every country to tailor some of the implementation programs and the communication material based on their specific needs. And then the number one is, this is basically where we started. So we use town halls. You have leadership meetings, and I'm sure you've got your management team meetings as well. So we used the regular meeting cadence that some of the functions and departments have, where we essentially invited ourselves to make people aware, or certainly the top of the house aware, of the program, of the deliverables, of timelines, etc. Next slide, please. Okay. Measuring the actual success. So what we have done and what we continue to do is that we monitor the success of the program, which you can do partly through the KPIs that you set for yourself in the actual system, but we also send out surveys. And we have focus groups on the one hand, but we also have an online survey that people can complete. So here's some of the findings in the latest one that we had. So in general, people are actually quite happy with the program that we have. And on the right-hand side, that people are typically very happy with the actual platform, which is the technology that supports the overall program. Next one, please. Here, along the same vein, so people typically agree with the fact that our program really supports the celebration of contribution and success. And a neutral to positive reply to the fact that they actually feel more engaged now that we have that program up and running. So overall, positive feedback. Next, please. Okay. So when we started to look at the actual data, because again, you've got technology that supports that program, and a couple of weeks into the actual deploying of the overall system, we started to pull some data from the tool, and that's when we started to realize actually what we have is just more than a recognition program. And why do we think that is? Well, because the tool is, it works like a social media platform, and it is a tool which is accessible to everybody in the organization. And for instance, there are factory people in the factory, for instance, they don't obviously have laptops. They do have their own smartphone, but it is a way whereby we can actually capture their digital behavior in a uniform way across the entire organization. And as recognition is in a way also about steering behavior, we see the potential to actually nudge people, again, to impact or to influence their behavior on the one hand. But we can also see, for instance, the relationship between the various departments and the functions, between the different levels that we've got in the organization. We can now do analysis based on gender, on age, etc. There's actually quite a lot that we actually can do. I'll give you some examples afterwards, but before diving into them, one of the comments of a member of the steering committee was, you actually promised us a recognition program, but what you deliver or what you have delivered is actually so much more. Next slide, please. Okay. So this is just, I've taken just 3 examples of the analysis that we started to do and that we continue to do. And this is example number 1. So it is a bit of a complex slide, so I'll explain you how to read this. So the squares are the managers, the circles are individuals. Each number represents 1 individual. Through the analysis, we can actually see that the more in the center you are, the more interactions that you have. So that's observation number 1. Through the research that we have done, it suggests that the more interaction that you actually have, the more satisfied you are with your job, and the more committed that you are as well. The less that you are on the outskirts, the less interactions that you have, which is a bit of a problem. You can do this analysis based on teams. You can do this across different locations, which is what the color actually represents. So you can actually see that, let's take a practical example, number 32 and number 47, even though these people are actually in different locations, you can really see that they're truly connected. And you can also see, if I take up, for instance, number 32, and I put that individual on a project, that creates a void in terms of the overall team structure. So that's a practical example number 1. Would you mind moving to the next slide, please? Okay. Here, this is actually some analysis based on individual networks. On the left-hand side, you can actually see that this individual, and again, a circle is an individual. You can actually see, okay, by doing this individual analysis, you can see that that individual is actually in connection with multiple individuals, not just within his or her own specific department, but across multiple departments. And again, why is this important? Is because innovation is typically not something that you do in isolation. So we really encourage this type of behavior, because the more that you interact with people, the more that you're aware with what's happening in the rest of the organization, be it in legal, be it in sales, be it in marketing, etc. So that is the type of behavior that we really want to see. On the right-hand side of the screen, what you see is the same individual, but this is now the number of recognitions that have been given with a monetary component. So it's the same individual that you see on the left-hand side, but on the left-hand side is the non-monetary. And on the right-hand side, you can actually see the monetary component. So as you can see, the individual has recognized not everybody in his or her network. And here it's also a way for us to, I would say, monitor and to make sure that people are making the right choices on how to award the monetary component. Next slide, please. Okay. Here, this is an example of how we measure the power distance. The Bridgestone and EMEA, we've got 6 levels, or 6 bands, as we call them. So B06 and B05, what you find in the middle of the circle, that represents a level. And on the left-hand side, this is the actual situation, or that was the actual situation up until a few months ago. And on the right-hand side, you'll see the environment or the culture that you actually want to have. So that is what we actually want to achieve. I'll explain you a bit how to read this. So on the left-hand side, if the dark green, it means that there's a lot of interaction between these 2 levels. So I start from B6, for instance, to B5. It means that most people in band 6 recognize predominantly band 5. Most people in band 5 recognize predominantly people in band 3. One observation that you have here is it's still very top-down. As a reminder, one of the goals that we have in the program is to have that peer-to-peer recognition, but this is something that we still not observe today. With the consequences that there's some work for us to do, again, to make sure that people recognize, not just the managers recognize the people on their teams, but it also people lower down in the organization recognize people at the similar level, or even their managers. So that's observation number 1. Observation number 2 is that if you look at band 1, for instance, which is predominantly people on the shop floor, but they're barely connected to some of the other levels in the organization, which, to be honest, is a bit worrying, because they are 60 to 65% of our overall workforce. It also means that they're 60 to 65% of our overall brain capacity, which to be honest, we're not using today. At least this is what we are observing here. Moving to the right-hand side, so that's really what we want to have. And again, we really want to put people at the shop floor in the very center of the organization, because they are the people that do the actual work. Again, that's 60 to 65% of our brain capacity. So imagine what we could accomplish by just engaging them a little bit more. And again, the other component that we really want to focus on is to have more peer-to-peer recognition, and also recognition from not just from the manager to one of their team members, but from also the team member towards the manager. So those are some 3 examples, and with some tangible outcomes also for us within Bridgestone, items that we are working on today. And again, just to showcase that it is not just about recognition. There's a hell of a lot more that you can get out of the data that we get through the Achievers platform.
Thank you, Nick. And for everybody who's on the line with us, I'm sharing with you again as a reminder our key principles, and I think it ties in really nicely to some of the examples that you just shared, Nick. And the goal, as I mentioned earlier, of this session is so that you not only get some line of sight into the Achievers methodology, but also how, or begin tying how it can work within your business, and trust that when we do start partnering with you, our recommendations are coming from a place to suit your organizational needs and objectives. And what's even better, having Nick here today, is that you don't have to take my word for it. He's one of our partners who have seen some early success and continuing to partner with the Achievers team on how to ensure that that is maintained and taken to the next level year over year. All right, thank you. Next, we have questions and comments, Sophia.
Great, thanks, Bianca. So as ever, just please continue to pop your questions in the question box, and we'll try and get through as many as possible. So the first question that we've had through is, what is one piece of advice that you have for other organisations who are about to start their journey with a new recognition or engagement provider?
I can take this, and Nick, please feel free to jump in if you care to. But I think really the first thing that you need to do is understand what you're looking to achieve. I think it's easy to get into the flow of implementation and be focused on a target launch because of all the other things that might be going on in your business, but not know where you're driving towards. And to have an idea of that upfront, and to know exactly what you're looking to leverage in the system to get there, which is something we'll of course help you identify, really makes the journey over the next year to 5 years to more than that with the Achievers team that much more clear. And it doesn't mean that that can't change or it can't be built upon, but understanding what's important to your business from a recognition and engagement perspective, and not shying away from having those conversations across the business is a really good place to start.
Yeah, Nick here. I can only echo this. What really worked for us is to align it with an updated vision for the organization, and it gives people focus. If you think about the values that we have within Bridgestone EMEA, we reshaped them a little bit and changed them slightly. It's a way for people to connect with the organization, not just with the vision for the organization as a whole, but also to some of your key values and behaviors that you have. It's in addition to the typical programming that you have in performance management. So I would say it's in addition to that program. It's using that multi-channel approach to align individuals to the organization, and that really worked for us. I'm not sure, to be honest, if our exco would have agreed us doing this project if we hadn't had that need.
That's great. So the second question that we've had come through is, what kind of plan did you put in place prior to implementation to help guide your decision-making process?
Nick, this might be best for you to answer. but happy to add some color from
No,
some
no, it's
other
fine.
partners.
So some of the so we based our program based on 5 key principles, and we came to those 5 key principles based on I mean, for 2 reasons essentially. One was the knowledge and the expertise from Achievers on the one hand, but also some of the research that we had done on the other hand. And we also obviously also leveraged our steering committee to help them because they were obviously a part of the overall program design. Because when we went to the Exco, we simply asked for the sponsorship and the funding of the plan, but we didn't necessarily present them this is with a way on this is what we're actually going to do, this is what it will look like, and this is how we're going to go about this. So we really leveraged our steering committee to help shape what a program needed to look like and what it is that it was, what it is that we would do and what it is that we wouldn't do.
Bianca, is there anything you'd like to add to that?
I actually think that that's a great answer, and I think the specifics that Nick was able to provide is completely applicable. As far as planning, a couple of other themes that I've seen and that we've discussed today is also understanding who you could potentially partner with throughout the business from a team perspective across maybe data and change management and of course the leads. That naturally comes out in the conversation that you're having with Achievers early on, but it's helpful to have that as part of your plan as well, so that when you are ready to get started, and if there is a time frame in mind, you can already, or you can rest assured that some of those folks have already been socialized what the program is.
Great. And the final question, this might be slightly more tailored towards Nick, but what importance does your organisation place on simplicity of the final tool and use of and user experience for your employees?
Okay. I can just share you my opinion on this. Technology should be seen as a supporting tool. What is really important is the actual program itself. And technology, while important, it's only as good as the people using it. And I mean, we ask ourselves the question on technology all the time, and not just with Achievers, but also, for instance, in our HRIS program. And to be honest, it's not that important. And the reason why I'm saying this is because I compare it to buying a microwave. You can buy a microwave with like a million options, but in the end, you still only use 3. And even though, and from an HRS perspective, it's exactly the same, but also from an Achievers perspective, it is not fundamentally different. Some of the tools that you will find, if you go out shopping or window shopping, you will see that some provider provides this, some provider provides that. To be honest, Achievers provides an awful lot. Otherwise, we wouldn't be able to do those detailed data analytics that we do within Bridgestone. But in terms of functionality, I wouldn't let this be the prime reason why you make a decision on whether you go for option A or option B. Does that answer the question?
Yes, perfectly. And Bianca, is there anything that you'd like to add?
Yes, and I completely agree with Nick's answer. The one perspective that I'll just add to add a bit of color is around removing barriers to access. There are likely a lot of existing practices that you are undergoing because it's always been done that way. And a part of the solution design section of implementation is really reviewing that those processes and that behavior, and really getting to the foundation of what is needed and what isn't, and we look to lean out, of course, if all possible, manual effort, but we also look to lean out the steps to take the action you're looking to drive, so that when it comes to communicating the functionality and how it can serve a purpose and drive a behavior, it's really simple and elegant and consistent. So mirrored to what Nick said, that is really the Achievers perspective when it comes to solutioning or scoping out how the functionality can tie to a behavior.
That's great. Thank you both for answering those questions, and thanks for sending in your questions as well. So I'd just like to take the time to thank you all for listening, and a special thanks goes to Bianca at Achievers and Nick at Bridgestone for the insightful exploration of recognition and engagement programs. We will be sending out a recording of the webinar, and if you like any further information, please get in touch with Achievers directly. On the landing page at the moment are all the contact details that you should need. Have a great afternoon, and we look forward to welcoming you back to additional webinars in future. Thank you.